Today, it's leadership weapon. Governance used to be treated like a rule book. Today, it's a leadership weapon because in the world of AI, cyber risks, stakeholder scrutiny, and trust deficits, leaders don't get rewarded for intent, they get rewarded for outcomes and can be defended. Organizations are now growing faster than their decision discipline, and when discipline breaks, everything breaks: reputation, resilience, compliance, culture, and investor confidence. Today, we have Ashok Prabhu sitting at the intersection of the board, governance, and coaching, where ethics meet execution and influence is built through clarity, accountability, and consistent standards. Before we dive into the topic, let's have a small video about Power of Knowing Forum. Welcome to Power of Knowing Forum's weekly podcast series. Let's welcome our guest, Mr. Ashok, and start the discussion.
Am I audible?
Sir, good evening. Good evening, sir. Welcome to our podcast, sir. You are
Yeah.
audible, sir. Yes.
Yes.
Good
Good
evening,
evening,
sir.
Prem. Yeah. Good evening, Prem. Thanks for having me, and nice to be with you and our audience today.
Sir, a small intro about yourself. Welcome to the podcast again, and a small intro about yourself to the audience, sir.
Sure. So let me try this. I'm based out of Mumbai. I'm a retired IT professional, so I spent my entire career, that's around 38 years, in IT. I worked in different IT companies, both in India and in the US. And I'm also a certified independent director that authorizes me to serve on the boards of Indian companies. I'm also a certified Marshall Goldsmith coach, leadership coach, and yeah, I'm quite passionate about ethics, about transparency. So those are two qualities that I really am passionate about. I am also passionate about, if I go outside my professional boundaries, I follow sports a lot. So I follow cricket, I follow football. So I'm a keen follower of England football in England, and I'm a keen Liverpool Football Club fan for the last 30 years almost. So that's about me in brief, Prem.
Thank you for that, sir. Quite a good experience, 30 plus years. So I also have about 30 years of experience. So we are having a discussion which is about 60 years of overall experience that we are having together today. I think so. I am also from the IT industry, which is been for 30 years now, and currently at a CTO, CIO level, fractional assignments that I'm taking care. Great to have you, sir. Sir,
Yeah.
to start with, what does it really mean to turn governance into growth, sir?
Okay, so let's maybe start with defining governance, just to be clear, and if we can be on the same page, right?
Yeah.
So what's governance? So governance, according to me, is a system of rules, processes, structure, through which either an organization or society is directed, controlled, and held accountable, right? Both in terms of decision making and as well as implementation. Whereas leadership is allowing a group of people to do something that they could not do on their own. So how do we do that? You give clarity of purpose, you create trust, you create shared responsibilities, you also make sure that as a team we do the right things, right? So as the famous quote goes about, between a manager and leader, right? Leaders, do the things right, whereas leaders do the right things, right? So it's important to do things that are right and do them well, right? So that's basically my take on governance and leadership, and how do we turn governance into growth, right? So according to me, Prem, based on my experience, it is like, you first define the values, you define the boundaries upfront, and keep on modifying them as required. Construct an organization structure that's nimble, empowered, yet aware of the boundaries that have been just set, right? And then choose the right team to fill that structure. And once you have that team, define a RACI matrix, that's RACI matrix, very very clearly, so that people know what is that they have to do, what they are accountable for, who are the people that are responsible, accountable, who are to be kept informed. Yeah, so once you do that, these are some of the things that if we do well, right from the board level to the executive leadership below, I think the next logical step would be growth. So that's how I look at it.
So got it, sir.
Mhm.
Got that point. So putting a logical way of looking at the pointers is what you are saying. Now, what are the three top governance moves that directly create business velocity, not bureaucracy? We don't want to create bureaucracy, but we want to create business velocity. How do you look at this point, sir?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Prem. So let me think about it. So I think I just refer to the racing website. So that becomes very, very important, because that defines your authority level, your responsibilities, your accountability level. So I think that becomes very, very important. The second, according to me, possibly could be if you develop dashboards that are real time, uh, that tell you, with respect to the key decisions that you need to take, what are the the set of data that will allow you to take the right decisions, right? And then it could also involve, and this is based on my experience with lean, right? Lean manufacturing and lean practices. Sometimes, if you make decisions, get into huddles with your team, maybe a 15-minute huddle per day, where you get into a huddle, work with your team, and allow everyone to express themselves on problems that you have to solve today, and understand why we are solving it, who will solve it. I think this decision huddles, if we can incorporate as a governance tool, I think these are some of the things that will really enable a corporate or any organization to achieve the velocity that's required, and not get stuck by bureaucratic type of structures. Frame.
Sir, where do leaders mistakenly slow growth in the name of control? Because most of the time it is control is what keeps things going, is what many people say. Now, where do leaders mistakenly slow growth in the name of control?
Okay, I think that's a tough one, but as per my experience, according to me, that this usually happens when leaders prioritize appearance over outcomes when it comes to decision making. uh, Most of the time, the delegation hasn't happened enough for the authority of hasn't been delegated enough across the organization. Hence, the control is more with the top levels. Why does that happen? I will not go into that. That's a separate story by itself. The second scenario frame could be that maybe the process is well defined. Maybe the delegation of authority did happen, but once a company or an organization grows organically a lot over time, some of these processes could come unraveled, right? So that could also mean that the CEOs will, or CEOs or the people at the top will like to take control back. It happens as a reaction of because of unbridled growth. So those could be a couple of scenarios. That could be definitely more, but those are the two that come to my mind.
Got it, sir. Uh, so what you are saying is growth is the fastest decision with fewer regrets, clear outcomes, accountability, clean metrics, and escalation paths, right? So that is what you are saying. And contrast with checkbox compliances. Rather than having checkbox, we have clear paths. That's the governance isn't a break. Bad governance is what we are trying to say. And with that, why is trust now measurable leadership outcome, not a soft value?
Okay. First of all, Prem, thanks for summarizing what I said earlier. In a couple of sentences, I think that came out, very, very well. So thank you for that. So I think your question is, why is trust now a measurable outcome, not a soft value, right? If I heard you right, is that correct, Prem? Okay. So okay, let me give you some context, Prem. So I was just reading. I think it was a survey from Deloitte, which threw up a very, very interesting result, right? So according to that survey, high trust leadership, correlates with 400% outperformance, right? So now 400% is a very huge tangible difference, right? Uh, one should also remember that trust is something that precedes results, right? So results follow trust. So if you were to measure trust independently, it would be a good leading indicator of what will follow. For example, if you look at an organization, right, which has customers, paying customers, one of the leading indicators could be access to your customer satisfaction survey, right? So how satisfied are your customers with you? What are the soft feedback that they're giving about you while saying that, hey, I rate you maybe at a 8, on a scale of 1 to 10. Right, so that could be one such data point. The other could be your own employees, right? When they participate in feedback, or they participate in surveys like great place to work for. There are a lot of points within that surveys, but some of them relate to trust. Like I've been involved in GPDW surveys for my organization when I work for them, and while it captures your employee feedback in 4 verticals, if I can put it that way. One of them is trust. Yeah, so your GPDW result outcome may be good, but you might be a little bit lagging on the trust. So that's something that I would be worried about, because trust is something that you need to cultivate, because it precedes your results or outcomes. So I think it's very important to measure those trusts. I give you a couple of examples. So we could have much more than that, but yeah, we live. Trust is no more just a value, soft value. It is something that now actually measures outcome. Prem, and thanks for asking that question.
Great, sir. Now, uh, coming to the next point that I want to ask is, what are the measurable leadership outcomes that we spoke about? What are the signals that an organization is losing trust before the market notices? Because by the time market notices, we should be in a position to retrieve our business back to this one. Is there something that you can say where we are losing trust before even the market notices itself?
I think there are plenty of them if if you just care to observe, right? So I call them early warning signals, right? And that's the term generally used. So I think there are plenty of early warning signals there. It all depends on whether you want to notice them, you want to take them into consideration. So there are plenty. So just to give an example, since we are also relating this to growth, right? So maybe a company has grown 20% organically year on year, right? But if you deep dive into that growth statistics, you may realize that maybe 25% of your existing customers that were there last year has gone away from you. Now that has
Okay.
been overcome by some other new customers that you brought in. So very good job done on the new business side, right? But there is also a signal that's being thrown at you, where it says that you have lost maybe 20% of your existing customers. Now, is that an important early warning signal? According to me, yes, right? So that could be one. Right. Again, if we go back to the GPDW, I will not repeat it, but just say that if you get a survey that is overall promising, but if you're lagging on the trust index, again that's something that might not uh, be a good indicator is what I can say. So again, those couple of signals that if you want to pick up, that would be good. Also, like if you're at the top level, you may also want to look at at the board level audit reports, whistleblower reports, and just see whether there's something in there which tells you that it's not come to the surface yet, but it's important enough for you to notice and act on before it becomes something serious. So I think these are some of the few things that you as a leader are would do well to keep an eye on, because that's a preceding things before something bad happens or something catastrophic happens.
Got it, sir. Got it. So what we are saying is, market, you get early warning signals before even the market knows, and where are we making that kind of a mistakes also is always known, but we at times neglect, but it shows up is what you are saying. Am I right in saying that, sir?
That's correct. So it's all to you whether what are the signals that you look at. Sometimes the biggest mistake we do is when things are going well, we think that hey, we need to do nothing, right? But those early warning signals are always there, and I'm not saying that they are all bad, right? There might be very good signals out there. So it's also important when you're successful and doing well to understand why you're doing well, and and when you're doing well, also to understand what are those areas that you're lagging, right? So I think you need to have that balance of just being on the lookout to improve things. So I think that's key. Pick up the early warning signals, always be open to improvement, and act on the improvement areas.
Okay, got it. Now, what are three trust metrics should be boards reviewing regularly? Because today we cannot wait for a board review and then come back and say we did a mistake, or we did not bring up that trust matrix to be there. What are those three trust metrics, sir?
Okay, I think good question. But before I answer it, I will also say, Prem, that for a board or for any leader, for that matter, when you uh, act upon data, it's also important to understand how accurate that data is, how by the data is. So, my first reaction is to get the data sources right, act on something that where the data is something that is very very independent, that's something very very reliable, very accurate. So that's something that I would just give as a context. Coming back to your questions, what are the three metrics that boards I think should review regularly? So if I think about it, so maybe one of your again, to repeat what I said a few minutes back, the repeat business that comes from your customers, right? I think is an important topic, right? So if you have some dashboards around that, that would be a quantitative type of data. You can also have pulse surveys of your customers and understand from the customers what is it that they are looking from you, what is it that you have delivered to them, what is it that they want to get from you, but they're not getting, right, for any reason. So I think those are something that I believe is important, because at the end of the day, customers are the ones that generate revenue for you as a company. The second one, if I were to think, I would put it as the capacity of the company to handle a crisis, right? So, the question I would ask is, if today, right now, a worst case scenario, happens, how well equipped are we as a company to, to detect it, and then investigate it, resolve it, and come to a stage where we come to a stage of what I call maturity, right? So tomorrow, if the similar crisis happens, we are in a position to quickly come back to a recovered state, right? So that's something that I would give high emphasis to. I would also think that when it comes to qualitative feedback, I think you should involve all your employees and get those feedback about from employees. Yeah, it could be from distributors, it could be from your vendors, right? It could also be from your auditor, your external auditor, right? So all those things could be very very important at a board level to look at and analyze those feedback with the independent mind and see if there is enough in there for us to change course, for example, right? So I think those would be maybe the three broad areas that I would look at, Prem.
Got it, sir. What you are saying is, if there is a repeatable evidence, customers trust you, is what you are saying, right? And employee trust also is gained because we are getting repeatable business from the same customer. So we are, that's one. And once you have the the employee trust and the customer trust, then you look at for the regulatory trust, where I can bring the regulations to the right way. Then we keep that transparency between the employee and the customer. Then we bring up tying them to the transparency, like incident handling and decision traceability. How are we talking to the customer? What are the risks? How is the risks getting highlighted? How are they worked out with the being very transparent? And this is what I think what you are saying in trying to bring those stuff. Trust isn't built in statements, because you can make a statement and forget it. It's built on evidence, and you say, this is the evidence, this is the issue we face, this is the evidence they are providing, this is the issue we face, this is the evidence, and this is how we resolve it. So that kind of a structure gives more trust from the customers. How should boards and CXOs govern AI decisions without killing innovation? Because we are talking AI everywhere. Innovation is coming in all forms. One can be disastrous also. So it becomes very important for the boards to look at how should the boards and the CXOs govern this AI decisions without killing the innovation. What do you say?
Right. So I think one of the important things is that you know innovation should be a core value for your organization, right? So irrespective of AI is there, AI is not there. Innovation should be key because that's the only way to survive, right? So I think that should be made key, to all the stakeholders, especially your employees. So I think that's the key message that needs to go out. So in the age of AI, what I feel is multiple levels of AI adoption within your organization. So I think it's very important, to have a catalog of AI cases that is and that should be all the AI use cases should list, the human owners who own it, the models used, and the data source used, right? So you sort of make out so that tomorrow you have a if I call it a framework where that is being adopted, right? So at least you know where it is used. The second thing would be, in innovation, you maybe have a tiered approach to approval and control of AI usage. So with that, for that, what I mean is, you categorize AI usage within an organization, maybe at three levels. Right? One is something where it's low risk type of usage, where maybe employees use it, develop dashboards, doesn't have any external implications. So there, maybe you could you have self approval for usage of that AI, and employee, as long as he sticks to the framework, he have to absolutely use it, right? So that's one. That's the first tier. The second tier could be a value that could be a little bit be where it needs to get up at a CXO type of level, where people have reviewed it, check for check whether safeguards are there. For example, you have biases, where privacy controls are well maintained, whether the audit trails are there, when you take a decision, whether there's enough audit trails why a decision has been taken by both the AI and as well as the owner of that AI use case, right? So that should be very clearly there. And then you also have the high levels being covered at maybe the board level, where or at the CEO level, where anything that has a very high impact needs to be signed off by board, the CEO. And again, important is that gets into the RASI matrix. That's what I think. And you can also have for example, cross-functional teams, right? So every week, every month, every quarter, you get a team discuss, what, how are the innovation use cases going? How is AI enabling such use of innovation? Is AI actually being a roadblock into innovation? So if you can do that through cross-functional reviews, where you have the functional teams, you have the legal team, you have the customer support teams all involved along the CXOs. I think that would be a great forum to get real-time feedback about how the AI use cases or AI adoption is going on within the organization. And if, since it starts at the top, and your question was how do we do this without killing innovation, so one of the powerful KPIs that could be maybe given to a CEO could be something, I term it as the innovation driven velocity index, right? So what that does is it measures adoption times for new AI initiatives that result in tangible outcomes. So that's a very goal given to the CEO, where he's told that innovation important. Adoption of AI, as long as it meets the innovation theme, is also something that will get measured by. But at the same time, it's linked to a very tangible time frame in which you produce a desirable outcome. Yeah, so that I think those are the three areas. I think you asked me for a few areas, so those are the things that come to the top of my mind, frame.
Got it, sir. So, what are the minimum AI governance artifacts leaders must demand? Because we cannot have everything on AI, right? Inventory, approvals, controls, and audit trails. Is this the minimum, or you have something in mind, sir?
I think I think I pretty much answered it in the previous question, frame. So what I meant was, I think the tiered approach to the risk control, yeah, is, I think, the key to you know, um, getting things done, is what I feel.
So, you want the leaders to look at a tiered approach based on the inventory can be, or it can be approvals, or it can be controls, or audit trails. So, which I think inventory becomes the first point is my this one. Then you go into the controls that are there. The
Correct.
controls give you evidence to bring in some of the pointers where audit trails fall into picture, and with those audit trails you have certain approvals, you may have certain controls again changing and modified, or you can alter them based on the audit trails that we have got. So I got that point. So
Yeah,
what
thanks for
is the
putting it in a nice
practical
sequence. Yes, thank you for that.
So, is there a way that we can look at risk also in the tiring basis stage, or what is the practical risk tiring model for AI use cases?
Okay, I think again, important question, Prem. So thanks for asking. So as far as I can remember, I think there is a EU standard where, again, you have that the risk tiering. Again, I think it talks about what I just spoke about. Like, you have a green risk tier, you have a yellow risk tier, you have a red risk tier, and yeah. So those are the three here. So you have those controls based on approval and controls based on the levels of the risk, and then um, yeah, and then you also you know when it comes to important things, you um, measure the impact before you go into live deployments, right? So you have pilots, you measure the impact, and only those pilots are good, then would you go ahead and run it into production. So that those, I think, are the basic criteria which the EU standards talk about, and I think that's a good starting point.
Yeah, so I think the standards are defined by the frameworks or the best practices that are there, and with those best practices which are bare minimum to start is what you are saying should be followed,
Correct.
because as the models or the AI implementation maturity comes in there, there's so keep it plain, classify use cases based on impact that can happen, required proportional controls are in place,
Yeah.
enforce review cadence to whatever pointers
Right.
that we want to look at, highlight accountability from for the outcomes, not the tools, because tools are enablers. Outcomes which gives you accountability is what we see, and that's what, if AI can changes decisions, AI must live inside the governance is what we are trying to look at. And what is the biggest mismatch between board confidence and real cyber readiness?
Uh, okay, so one of the things that happens is that you know, see when somebody says we are cyber ready, right? So it's usually drawn up on a checklist, right? Okay, this happens, have I said this, and is it is it supposed to work well, right? So it's more of a checklist, is what I think most organizations follow. But I think the real world simulations are what actually make a difference, right? So tomorrow, if a disaster were to happen, right, the question is how fast can we recover, right? So that becomes the the most important point. Without a credibility getting hurt, right? So that also becomes important. Tomorrow, if there's a ransomware attack, right? So what is the strategy of the organization, right? So do we, what do we do, right? So that becomes very very important. So it also brings me, if I remember right, Prem, and I'm just trying to remember. There's a recent survey done of multiple organizations, and I think this was in the US. And the survey said that of all the organizations that were reviewed for cyber readiness, cyber security ready, the the top level, that is the cyber mature organizations, right, just constituted about 4% of of all the companies. So cyber mature is the highest level of a company being cyber ready. They have tested everything, they have a governance in place, they have a crisis management in place. So if I look at all of that, only 4% of the companies are at that level. So it doesn't, I mean, it could mean that the other 96% are also in, quite close to it, but they're not quite there. So I think the important thing would be to do the real world simulations. Sometimes we also assume a lot of things while doing checklists. So I think that's something that we need to get rid of, and make sure our objectives are set right. So what are your recovery time objectives? Those are the things that need to be very very clearly documented after real world simulation, not through a checklist, checkbox ticking type of thing is what I can talk about, Prem.
Sir, now coming to that point, now what are the three questions every board should ask their CISO every quarter? Because though gone are those days where you have half yearly, 1 yearly reviews, right? Now it is becoming weekly, but we want to look at how do we start also we started it. So we want to look at CISOs at a quarterly basis.
Okay, great question, Prem. So again, I will start off with what I just said at the end of your last question. So I think the recovery time objective, becomes very very important. Yeah, because that's what will pull you out of a crisis, and you will land with your feet down or feet up, right? So that makes a real difference. Another question that I could maybe, as a board member, ask a CISO is, what are the top three, top five cyber risks to our goals, right? And how are we measuring the mitigation for those? So again, I'm just to be clear, I'm not talking about IT goals. I'm talking to business goals. So what are the business goals, right? So tomorrow, today, if I'm a banking organization, what will stop my operation tomorrow if a cyber attack were to happen, right? So so what are those top risks, and how are we mitigating those, right? So those are the questions I would ask. And the third would be a little bit more humble, I would say, Prem, because it's not a one-way street. Because the third question from me would be, what is the support that you need from me for us to become the most cyber nature company, cyber mature company in our line of business. right? So it's not that I'm directing a CISO. It's also that I have to give him all the resources that he needs to be successful, right? So those are the type of conversation that I would like to have with the CISO. Is what I can think of.
What you're asking to look at or measure the CISO's role in terms of looking as RV readiness versus the documentation, right?
That's
Push
correct.
onto a tabletop exercises. How good is our recovery proof, right? So,
That's correct.
and most of the times we are having a dependency on the third party vendors. And
Right.
how is that third party vendor exposure look at the moment? What is the clarity do we have with those risks is what I think is what you are saying. And it ties up to very clearly saying what is to what we are, what is as is to what is what we are talking about. And cyber governance is not awareness, it is readiness you can prove, because today businesses are working all across the globe at 24 hours per 7. So you need to show how availability is there for every business. And this availability only can be shown with evidence like RTO, RPO proofs, what is the recovery times that we have, what is the last drill that we had, what was the lessons that we learned in last drills, what is that we have mitigated of those after those drills, can we test those mitigations. And these are some things which becomes proof. Cyber, again what I'm saying is cyber governance is not awareness, it is readiness that you can prove with these kind of metrics. Coming to the transparency part and the ethics part, how leaders we are looking at, how do leaders build integrity that survives pressure? Because that you will find true leadership when there is pressure only. So, your take on this.
Okay, great question again. So, Prem, what I think is, good leaders, they build enduring integrity by designing, decision systems and cultures that, prioritize evidence-based ethics, right, over expediency, right? Sometimes expediency becomes, the go-to route, but that's not how it should be. And this should, be there even under extreme pressure, like in a crisis. So coming back to your question, so what are how do leaders build that integrity, right? So I think few things that I can think of is maybe have those mandatory type of conflict disclosures. So for example, right, um, if you have interest, if you have conflicts while taking a decision, I think those are something that should be disclosed upfront. You should also build that culture of psychological safety where it's safe for anybody to speak up. Yeah, that no blame culture, right? So you allow people to speak, allow people to do, commit mistakes as long as they are done with the right, intention of doing the right things. Uh, I talked about no blame culture. So if you were to do postmortems, right? So you can do those postmortems, and while doing that, encourage truth telling and ensure that there's no fear that comes out for anybody. Also, it becomes important that how do you make a person accountable, right? So the rules have to be very clear and uniformly applicable to anybody in the organization. So if you can enforce that uniform accountability, for example, same penalty for the same violation, uh, and encourage that culture of leaders owning up to mistakes, even in a public forum, I think that will go a great deal, in fostering the transparency and building up integrity at the long term.
Got it, sir. So, very, very clear. Now, coming to the next point, what causes ethical drift in otherwise good organizations?
Okay, so again, there could be multiple reasons, Prem, but what I have seen and observed is that it starts off with a small compromise, right, done by any somebody in the organization. The manager says, okay, it's small compromise, it's not a big deal, right? So usually, it starts off with a small compromise, then it becomes a series of small compromises that becomes a culture in the organization saying that, okay, as long as it's small, manageable, it's okay to do, right? So that's one of the most likely reason why you have what you call it drifts. Uh, Sometimes organization in their bid to enforce short-term targets, right? So also be a result. I'm not saying it should mandatory be, but that be one of the reasons why people compromise again a little bit on on your ethics, to know that you achieve your short-term results. So that's something that I've seen happens. And sometimes if you have to build up on that short-term pressures, there are few companies that deal with extreme what is often termed as pressure cooker cultures, right? So there's extreme pressure to achieve your objectives quarter on quarter, and that causes then you lose sense of your moorings, and then you run after those targets, you run after your individual targets and the team targets. And as I said, you could start off small, but at the end of it, when you add up everything, it could become a large ethical drift, and it could be on the wrong path.
Got it, sir. Got it. How do leaders create transparency without creating fear? Because most of the speakers don't, or the team don't speak out with leaders fearing so many things. So, how do we create that transparency for them to speak out?
Okay, so I think the leaders have a very powerful role here. Prem. So I think one anecdote comes to mind, if I can maybe just go ahead with that. And this is something to do with Warren Buffett, who's a legendary investor, right? We all know him. So one of the things he used to do was come out with annual statements, right? So annual statements to is the investors in his company. So I think the story goes this way. I think one of the years where he produced that annual report, there was a particularly bad investment. I think it was in a shoe company, and that investment did not go well, right? So it turned out to be a bad year. So you know, since there were multiple investment that is done that were handled by Warren Buffett, and this just happened to be one of them, very easy for him to even have mentioned it in his annual statement, and he could have just made it a footnote along with his in the letter, right, saying that, hey, by the way, we made this investment, and it was one of the three bad investments along with 20 good investments, right? But what he did was that he said, hey, today this particular company is the worst deal I've made, and he also said, I will make much more mistakes in the future. You can bet on that, right? So this is message that he sent out. So what that basically implies is, by being the first person, to point out his own what is termed as nakedness, right? Absolute transparency regarding that deal, he increased investor trust, right? So shareholders now felt that he was so honest about a failure. If he's so transparent about a failure, there's no reason why you should not trust him when he talks, right? So it was an example of turning a financial loss into a massive gain in influence. Right? So it also the powerful message to the employees. Genuine mistakes are okay. I've done it. I've disclose them and move on, right? So that's a message. So to answer your question, I can just say that leaders create transparency without fear by what I would say pairing openness with psychological safety, sharing the context of proactively, and allowing yourself to be vulnerable and accountable. So those are I think the main areas.
So what very clearly said, because uh, if a leader has to connect ethics to a decision design, he has to say where he was vulnerable, where was the conflict, where was the disclosures that were there, what was the system ups that we had, and what was the consistent consequences also, right? So this could not be the first mistake also. There could be some more mistakes which may look bigger when compared to this mistake. So I think we are making mistakes. With mistakes we learn also, is what we are saying. And leadership is a role remodeling, right? It is to see how you take pressurized systems, understand how bad decisions went, and where we went with those bad decisions, and where ethics fail quietly but until it falls loudly. So if it fails loudly, then there is a problem. If it falls or fails ethically or quietly, I think it gives a lot of sense, where you say this is what we did, this is where we had a problem, we found the problem, this is the problem, this is where we fixed it, and this is how the solution worked out. And because of this could be one of the hits that we will take, and this will not be repeated in consequent situation, but we may not take a decision which is like this. So that's how you think what we are saying. So coming to the last question that I have for the evening: how do great leaders create decision discipline across distributed teams?
Okay, so again, I will go back, to what I started off with. I think the framework is something that you need to define very clearly, right? So, if you can define, the framework, you can define the accountability, for the decisions that you or your organization makes. So I think those are the key areas, and within that, I can again go back to the racing matrix, right? So define racing matrices at each level. So who is responsible, who's accountable, who's consulted, who's informed. You define that upfront, right? You can also pair the RACI matrix with what you what I will call them a decision making principles, right? So you also need to tell your teams what are those core areas which you give weightage to while taking a decision. For example, right? You might say the first thing that or the most important thing when I take a decision is what is the impact on our customers, right? So that's the first level, the most important, decision principle. Second could be something else. Third could be something else. So the teams should be, aware of it, and everyone acts on that, level of value, saying that okay, my decision is based on this first, this second, this third. So that combined with AC, according to me, is a very very strong tool. The second part, what I will say is, before taking decisions, there's something called asynchronous decision loop. So you post proposals, that something that you are planning to take a decision on, in a uh, for want of a better word, in a shared folder that the team has access, and say that hey, here is the decision. I give you 48 hours in which to come back with your proposal, why this decision is going to be good, why this decision is going to be bad, if you have other ways of doing it. So I think that could also be a strong, way of ensuring that people are participating in that decision making, right? So they end up being owners of that decision. So that, and also maybe referred to this earlier. While taking the decision, you could have maybe a 15-minute decision making hurdle, right? It comes from the lean principles. So once you have every member of your team or most of the members of your team participating in the decision, having the right to say, hey, I think that's a bad idea, or why can't you do it this other way, and coming up with evidence saying that, hey, if I do it this way, I think this will be much better. So allowing a democratic way of working through a decision making hurdle, maybe incorporate that as a daily practice or a weekly practice. I think those are the maybe 2 or 3 areas, Prem, that I think we can really instill that. This, I think your question was around decision discipline, right? In teams that are well distributed, right? So I think these are maybe some of the areas that I can think of that will address that.
Got it, sir. So got it. Sir, with this, we are on top of the hour. I would like to summarize some of the points that we've discussed in the last 45-50 minutes. Governance becomes the growth when it makes decisions faster, cleaner, and more defensible without ambiguity. So that's the first point that we are learning. Trust is built through evidences, transparency, accountability, and consistent crisis behavior, not messaging. So that's the second point. AI and cyber are now board level governance topics because they change decisions and consequence at scale, because both are required. Now, coaching and mentoring create governance maturity by building ownership, clarity, influence without authority. So, right, so that you give them everything, but you give it in a form that is not authoritative, but it gives the baseline that needs to be followed, and it is a rule book that they have to follow, right? So, the best governance systems feels like enablement because they remove chaos and reduce regret, because most of the people don't come out and talk to us because it can create a chaos. And there also could be something that, because if you did this mistake, this is the regret that we are able to face and stuff like that. So we don't create that kind of a listen. These are the pointers that I have taken a note on it, sir. Thank you for being here, sir. And one thing as a takeaway to the listeners is that it's great leaders don't use governance to control people. They use governance to protect, trust, accelerate outcomes, build influence that last, is what we want to say. And any final statements that you have from your side, sir, before we close the session?
No, I think you summarized it pretty well, Prem. The only thing what I will maybe say is governance should be of such a nature, if it's more most mature, is that it survives you, right? So it survives you, and tomorrow if somebody else were to come in your place, somebody else comes in the CEO's place, somebody else comes in the CXO's place, your company is still well taken care of, right? So that's what a good governance really means, from a legacy perspective. So that's the final thought I will leave you and the audience with.
Thank you for that, sir.
Thank you
With
for
this,
having
we
me.
would like to conclude our sessions, and thank you for joining us today, sir. It's great having. Thank you, audience, for joining us today and making this event more memorable. And we'll keep doing more events. Coming next week, we have another session on. Sorry, we coming tomorrow. We have another session which we will announce after end of this show. Thank you for that, sir. Thank you, joining.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and best wishes to everyone.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.